Hello, in this video we're going to set up VLANs and routers together to make what we lovingly call router on a stick. So with the packet tracer pulled up, let's have two PCs. And this top one, PC 0, we will make on 192.168.1.2 and a 24-bit. And we'll actually add it in there, 192.168.1.2. And we'll pre-plan and say our default gateway is going to be 192.168.1.1. We don't need to worry about the DNS server for this. Now let's do the same for this one, but put it on a different subnet. 2.2.1. Forgot dash. And the IP address 192.168.2.2. And our default gateway here is going to be 2.1. Next, let's bring in a switch. You'll click Networking Devices, go to Switches, and I'll bring in a 2960. Okay, we need to plan a little bit here before we go further. Let's mark off each subnet with a color. So we'll make this top one blue. And we'll make the bottom one, we'll say green. That'll just help us differentiate the two. Next, we need to plan out which ports we're going to connect on the switch, because we're going to separate them out with the VLAN. So the fact that they're on a different subnet is good that the traffic is separated, but still, all someone has to do is switch their IP address and they're in the different subnet. So we want to actually put up a vertical divide, a VLAN between them. So why don't we make ports, we'll just say port 1 is going to be for VLAN 10, and then we'll say port 2 is equal to VLAN, we'll make it 20. By default, everything is on VLAN 1, so we will want to create VLAN 10 and VLAN 20. We also want to connect the router to those, or to, I'm sorry, the computers to those appropriate ports. So let's do that now. We'll connect Ethernet or straight through cable, fast access Ethernet. Go there and connect there. And let's console in. So we'll bring in that machine to do that with. Okay, and it registered that those two ports were just plugged in. Let's go to enable mode. Configure the terminal. And now we want to make the VLAN. So let's go interface VLAN 10. And we'll say no shutdown. So that it's on. If you want to see what options are available, you can just say question mark. If I wanted the computers to be able to SSH into the switch, I would add an IP address here, but I'm not interested in that. Then I can also give it a name here by typing in VLAN 10. Question mark again, you can type a name, and we'll call this one blue. And I'll do the same thing. Let's interface with VLAN 20. Type in no shutdown, so it's on. And exit. Go type in just VLAN 20, and we'll give this one the name of green. And let's exit out of this. So if I type in show VLAN brief, you will see we now have VLAN 10, which is called blue, VLAN 20, which is green. They're both active, and they don't have ports assigned to them yet, so that's our next goal. Let's go to config terminal again and interface with, we'll say fast access 01 and switch port mode, switch port access VLAN 10. So this means we are switching from VLAN 1 to VLAN 10. And I'll type in no shutdown on this one because I want it administratively up. And we'll go back into the, the next port, which would be port 2, which is what our green one's connected to. And we'll say switch port access VLAN 20. And again, no shutdown. Exit, exit, and show VLAN brief. If we look at this again, we now have port 1 assigned to VLAN 10, and port 20 is, port 2 is on VLAN 20, and port 1 is on VLAN 10. You can shut down the other ones that aren't being used. An easy way to do that is config T and then interface with a range. And you'd say fast access 03 to say 24. And then you would just say shut down. And that means if you plug into the switch on anything other than 1 or 2 or the gigabit ports, which we didn't include in this, it won't work unless you go back in and turn this on. So administratively shut down means if you plug in a computer to it, it doesn't matter, it won't turn on or won't connect you. But again, all we really need to pay attention to for this is those two. Okay. So we have two barriers that are preventing the 1.0 network from talking to the 2.0 network. One of them is the fact that they're on different subnets. The second is that there's a VLAN dividing them. So those are two solid ways to separate network traffic. But now I do want them to communicate. So if you click network devices, let's add a router in. I'm going to add in the 2911. And of the ports I didn't shut down, which the gigabit ones, I'm going to plug in, let's say gigabit Ethernet 1, and we'll just connect it to 00. It's best to label this. So we are going to write down here that gigabit 01 on the switch will be my trunk connection. To verify that was the right one. Yep. And we'll go over here and say gigabit 00 on the router is going to be receiving that trunk connection. So actually, I'll just leave it at that for the moment. So let's get back in here and make this a trunk cable. If you remember, the trunk cable carries multiple VLANs with it. You can say, if by default it'll carry all of them, but you can specify and say, I only want you to carry 10 and 20. So you go to terminal, OK, and config terminal, interface with the gigabit port. Oh, 01. The router is 0001. The switch is starting at 1. And here, switch port mode trunk. It's no longer an access port. It's trunk. And we'll keep this one on. It's a good idea to save your work. Copy run start, which stands for copy running config startup config. All right, now let's move over to our router. We'll just bring in another machine and we'll console in. And we'll move this over here. Desktop, terminal, click OK. We'll say no to the initial setup. We'll just set it up ourselves. Enable mode, config terminal, and let's interface this time before we turn it on. there's a neat trick that you can do to say, hey, this is coming from VLAN 10 or this is coming from VLAN 20. If you had to have a separate cable for every single VLAN, our routers would have an enormous amount of ports. This one only has 3, so under the current system, it could only have 3 VLANs, and that's really limiting. So, which is why we're sending it through one cable with a trunk, our trunk connection. So, the port is gigabit 00. However, we're actually going to say gigabit 00.10. This is a sub interface. So we have the trunk connection, but we're saying this is actually a VLAN coming in. And if you hit question mark, you can see all the options that are here. We want to use encapsulation and then dot1Q. If I press question mark, you'll say which VLAN are you expecting here, which is 10. The next thing we want to do is give it an IP address. So blue is in the 1.0 network. So IP address 192.168.1.1. Press question mark and you'll see that we want a subnet mask too. And lastly, keep it on. Exit out. We're going to do the same thing, but instead of .10, since it's VLAN 10 and 20, we're going to do gigabit 00.20 for the sub interface of VLAN 20. Now we are going to type in the encapsulation dot1Q, and again the VLAN goes after this, which if I guess it's VLAN 20, and we want to give it an IP address of 192.168.2.1. It has to be in the same subnet as green. Turn it on. Now good. You'll notice the port is still off. If I try to ping from blue to green, it's not going to work. So I have to interface with gigabit 00 and turn on the entire port. So no shut down. And voila, everything comes on. So let's give it a moment. Or we can fast forward it right there. So what we've done is the default gateway for 1.2 is 1.1. Let's verify that we put it in there. We did. And we'll do the same thing on 2.2. And we did. So the default gateway is in there. So now this is an access port, this is an access port. Over here is a trunk port going to a router. So if we can click this, we should now be able to reach 2.2. And it might fail the first time because it's trying to route where everything is. So we'll give that a minute. And it works. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is router on a stick. We have used dot1Q encapsulation. We're using access ports, trunk ports, and VLANs. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it.